Welcome to the Mindful Millennial Podcast, where host Seth Marcus dissects and discusses all things impacting the millennial mind. Mentors, peers, and professionals share intimate conversations on subjects such as entrepreneurship, exercise and health, the blessings and curses of technology, travel, and how to navigate adulthood in this age of information. We're the largest generation in history, and we dictate the future. The Mindful Millennial finds a signal through the noise.
What is up, everyone? Seth here, and I am so excited to be back home in Denver, Colorado, and to be back on the MindMill podcast. Needless to say, the last 5 months have been life-changing. For those of you who haven't been following, I spent all of early 2018 traveling solo through Europe and North Africa. The purpose of this trip, besides the obvious, was to trial a nomadic lifestyle, balancing fun and work as I wander a new area of the world. During the journey, I captured my experiences with photography and a daily journal. I've been releasing these travel posts in a multi-part, quote, MindMill Abroad series that I have on the website. For full albums of photos, videos, and reflections on travel life, go to themindmill.com and check out the MindMill Abroad. But now I'm back, adjusting, digesting, and integrating back into American life. My to-do list is bottomless, my calendar is quickly filling up, and the, quote, real world has never felt so real. Today's episode is the beginning of a 2-part recap episode on my travels and lessons learned over the past months. Brian Tyree, a good friend and one of the most well-traveled people I know, joins me as we chat about travel lifestyle, preparation, lessons learned, and philosophy. I knew Brian would be a great co-host, but the outcome of our conversation far exceeded my expectations. We dive in on my journeys, relate on common places and feelings while traveling, talk logistics, and share stories from the road. We both had a great time recording this, so much so that the full conversation is nearly 3 hours long. So I divided it into a 2-part episode, with today's being the first. I hope you enjoy this travel recap episode with myself and Brian Tyree.
So basically, how I wanted to start this out is I kind of wanted you to take us back to January. So when you started your trip, you started thinking about this trip. I wanted to kind of get inside your head and figure out what you were thinking at that time, because this is all pre-travel, right? This is you preparing, this is you packing, this is you getting things together. What was going through your mind?
Well, I guess we'll start with a why.
Yep.
So I decided to rewind even further back. Europe was always the first place I wanted to travel. But when I first looked at serious travel, Europe was crazy expensive, more expensive than I could afford at the time. And I was thinking about it, it's just like going to another place full of white people. Don't get me wrong, it's totally different than I had ever expected, but I really wanted my first sense of travel to be a big culture shock, right?
Yep.
So when I finally did decide to do Europe, it was when I had a bit more time to spend there, as well as a good reason to do so. So my family, both of which Ann and Mike Kaplan have been on the show before.
And who is Ann and Mike Kaplan? Can you explain that?
My cousin Mike has always been my big brother in life, always been my mentor, and he's one of my best friends. He married Ann, who is also like a sister to me, and they have 4 children who are like my little brothers and sisters. And up until about a year and a half ago, I guess a year ago right now, they were living in Denver, and I was living in Denver, and we had this great family community here. They decided to move to spend a year in Spain to see if they could work abroad, see how the kids and the family reacted, just see what
awesome.
The other side of the world is like. And they have some close family friends that live there as well. So Almeria, Spain was the destination. So with them leaving for a year, it was the perfect opportunity for me to kind of anchor that location and a trip to visit them with a full European adventure.
Yeah.
That, and I had been, and this is a topic for another episode, hopefully, but I had been pretty burned out with the cannabis industry.
Yep.
And we've shared a lot of history in the cannabis industry, and
Absolutely.
We have plenty of stories, but I just reached my limit. For 2 reasons. 1, I wanted to go into something that I was more passionate about than the industry as it is right now. And 2, I wanted something I could do anywhere. I want to have a job that, yes, requires a lot from me and has meaning and passion and all the things that millennials want from a job, but especially the mobility factor.
Yep.
I wanted to be able to set up, crack my computer, and get going anywhere in the world.
You don't want to be tied down by anything.
Absolutely. So with those concepts in mind, that's how I planned this trip to Europe.
Awesome. So you're saying that you started out in the cannabis industry and you got really burnt out on it, and then you feel like you needed something to kind of push you a little bit mentally. But it seems like you're saying that you also need something to push you more career-wise. Did you find that out there? Is that something that you're seeking while you're going on this trip?
Man, I think the best way to go about travel, and Brian, I want to make this very clear. We kind of jumped right into this thing. I want this to be a back and forth. I want to hear a lot about you, because the reason I brought you on this is not only to throw some things at me so I can open up a bit about my trip, but you're the most traveled friend I have.
Oh, thank you.
And I would love to hear combative stories. I would love to get back and forth about this. And Brian Tyree, check him out. He's a great guy. So anyway, to answer your question, I had traveled twice for a relatively long term, and this was my longest yet. And I knew to stay kind of blissfully ignorant when it came to it and just keep an open mind and see what happened. But I also didn't want to go there with no goals. If I went to Europe and I didn't have any reasoning behind it, then I would find myself falling into some kind of lazy or unhealthy habits.
You'd just be out there flailing.
Yeah, or partying, or just getting kind of depressed or locked into one place, or kind of on the flip side, just burning through cities just to say that I've been there without really soaking into any of these destinations.
Honestly, that's the mistake I made when I traveled.
That's a super common early mistake. An early traveler will say, like, I'm going down to South America to travel. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. How long are you traveling? They're like, a month. I'm like, that's awesome. Where are you going? And they're like, well, we definitely got to do Brazil. Then we're going to do Colombia, and then probably down to Argentina. Dude, you're going to see 2 cities. Because if you really...
Well, they're going to see a lot of cities. They're not going to experience the cities.
Right.
And that's what I think is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you can hop around to a bunch of different cities, but to be able to sink your teeth in and digest the culture and have these really crazy, intimate experiences with the locals, I think is a completely different thing that most people don't really do. They're like, I went to that city, that city, that city. Well, you might as well just been on a bus.
Right.
Stopped at all those gas stations in those cities, right?
And that's exactly a conversation I had with my friend Nick, who's in the band Walk the Moon, because we met in Paris. And this is kind of jumping around, but he was telling me how much he envied that I had a week to spend in Paris, because he's been to Paris for probably cumulatively a week. But it's always, we arrive at 3 p.m. We set up, we sound check, we do press releases, we play our show, we pack up, we leave. So you experience Paris on a drive-by. And that's his job. That's being on tour. You have to do it that way. So he's seen all these cities that I've been to, but only pretty much through a car window.
And they probably all blur together. He's doing the same thing every day. Sound check. This time, this, you know what I mean? Totally. The tour manager has that all set up. So it's like, all right, at 2:00, we got to be there, and this and that and the other. They don't really get to explore it. They don't get to sink their teeth in. So that's what I think it's great about what you did. And like I was saying before, I didn't do that. When I traveled, I moved to New Zealand when I was 20. And I was just, oh, I'm in New Zealand. What do I do now?
And it's quite a country to have nothing planned on. You get there, I'm sure it's quite rural. And
I was broke. I had $500 in my pocket. I was like, well, I need to find somewhere that'll hire me and give me some food or a shelter or something. And even then, I traveled New Zealand, Australia, and Southeast Asia on that trip. And when I was in Southeast Asia, it was like the most time that I was just going from city to city to city, and I didn't have a goal. And not to say that I regret that.
You're also 20, and it's kind of like, you don't know what you don't know, so let's just get out there and see it and figure it out.
I want to get drunk. You know? That's what I want to do. I wanted to get drunk. I wanted to party. I wanted to be in a cool area. I wanted to experience some craziness, and that's why I decided to hitchhike around Southeast Asia. So let's do it. Why not?
I don't want to date you, but that was pre-iPhone. That was pre Google Maps in your pocket too. So
absolutely.
And that's something I don't think I'll ever be able to compare my travels to, because I don't see myself ever traveling without the luxury of having Wi-Fi access.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely. And that's the thing that was crazy, is that we would meet people while traveling and be like, let me get your email address. And then we'd have to go to a local cafe and write out all our emails. Where are you guys going? We're going here. We're doing this. What is your plan? Blah, blah, blah. And try and make up different things to be able to meet up with these people and go on these sort of adventures, which is great. But like at the time, this is just what you do. Now that we have the access to the iPhone, it's like, oh, this would be a lot easier.
Right. Let's circle back to that about the technology side of things, because that is something I really want to talk about at some point in this saga of travel experiences and stories that we're about to share.
One question I have for you. Let's go back to in January.
Sure.
How did you pack for this?
Okay. Well, so goals. I had an ultimate goal, and my goal was twofold. One was to not do the common mistake of seeing city after city and not soak anything in. And two, which relates into that, is I wanted to have a mission for it. And my mission was I want to continue feeding the MindMill. I had backlogged some episodes, and the episodes always take a bit longer to edit and to prepare for release. So I had a lot of work to do with the archived episodes. I also had intentions on recording a few episodes abroad. I managed to only record one live episode. What made up for it was the final goal, which was the photography. So all last year, I had been working with my really good buddy, Jake, who had been teaching me photography as I was doing Westward interviews with him. So he was assigned to do these video interviews for a mayoral candidate or a slam poet or these impactful people here in Denver. I volunteered to do the interviews, and that's where I really fell in love with this whole podcasting interview sort of style that has picked up in the MindMill. But also, I wanted to use it as an opportunity to learn the art of photography, which I'd always wanted to do, but never had the chance to because I was always a band kid in school. My band teacher would never let me take another elective. He needed me playing bass no matter what semester it was. So my goal was work on my photography and use the photographer's eye to soak in the city. Because when you look at things as a photographer, and this is something I learned pretty much as I got into Europe, is it forces you to slow down and to see the intricate and to go beyond driving past the Colosseum and taking your posed photo in front of the Eiffel Tower or whatever it may be, and find the angle and be like, oh, well, if I could get a shot from the rooftop of that building overlooking this park, that would be amazing. And so then you walk through and then you have to interact with the French guard and be like, hey, I'm a photographer. I was just wondering if there was any way I could get up onto this balcony for 2 seconds, take a couple photos, come back down. It just starts to force you to kind of seep into the culture a bit more, both visually and socially. So the photography was such a hidden gem of this whole traveling.
Interesting.
It just forced me to like look at everything on a different level and on a more subtle level. So to answer your question, how I packed, I had to pack like a mobile digital nomad, if you will. So I had 2 bags. I had my clothing in my large duffel, and I had my work bag. And the duffel bag was filled with sub zip-up compartments with all my clothes rolled up. I made a few mistakes with what I packed. Just, I didn't know where I was going to head. I didn't know if I was going to head north immediately and be in snow and sleet in the mountains, maybe do some trekking through the Alps. I didn't know if that was the route I was going to go, or if I might have gotten fed up with Europe and just decided to go to Vietnam. I didn't know where I was going to head. So I needed to have a huge gamut of different clothing options.
Yeah.
So I packed pretty widely, but also I packed with easy to clean gear that I could wear over and over again. I specifically picked clothing that did not have logos or English writing on it. I didn't want to be...
No Make America Great Again hats?
No, I left that one back in my Trump shrine here.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
No, I went out of my way to buy some blank tees and really multi-use shoes. I brought a pair of gym shoes, running shoes, and I brought a pair of light hiking shoes that were waterproof. And that was a couple combinations. I have one pair of jeans and some nice jackets. I'd say the top gear that I would absolutely recommend everyone bringing was my Nano Puff Patagonia jacket.
Yeah.
The reason being, one, it's just an amazing jacket. It's water resistant and it's incredibly warm, but also it packs into its own inside pocket. So you don't need an extra bag. It packs down super tight, and then you can use it as a pillow if you're not using it.
Oh, yeah.
So that was my go-to. Every single day, that thing was either in my bag or on my body. So duffel bag had all my clothing. Work bag had my laptop, which was quite a liability to carry around all the time. Kind of kept me on my toes. My camera gear, I brought my body and 3 lenses. I ended up mailing one home because I wasn't using it. I needed to pack lighter, and then an abbreviated podcast gear. So I was packed a little heavy. I had edited that pack list down multiple times just because I knew that I was going to have to carry all this with me. But still, like I said, I didn't know where this journey was going to take me. There were certain things I just wasn't ready to let go and need when I got there.
Yeah, when I packed, I felt it very beneficial to pack my bag a month before I went, and then each week go back to my bag and be like, do I really need this? Is this actually going to help? And kind of slim down my bag as the weeks went on before my trip. I felt like that always helped. So you have like a whole bag of electronic stuff. Didn't that freak you out? Did you stay in hostels and stuff like that where you're like, I get jacked, right?
Sure. Well, my first 6 weeks was my visit to Almeria.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely the best decision I could have made. First of all, it's about as south in Europe as you can get, We're talking warm weather, the beach, and my family and all of the family friends and the people that they had met from living there for these last months since they had moved. I got my feet wet. I was in a safe environment, small town. I was staying in a friend's extra room so I could really spread out. And I just got used to the European lifestyle, and I started getting used to having my bag on me and how I would be more
And how long were you there again?
I was in Almeria for 6 weeks.
Gotcha.
That was my first experience in like living in a different city, right?
Yeah.
I'd never done something like that before. And that was also where I kind of figured out how I could weasel in some work time, when that's going to work out. Especially there's the US time and there's European time.
Yeah.
And there's only a very small window that overlaps of kind of functioning business hours. So if I need to communicate with people back here in the United States, I would have to do that between 4 and maybe 9:30 or 10 at the absolute latest Spanish time in order to be kind of catching the morning to early afternoon in the US. So I started understanding kind of like how my workflow would happen. I also
structure your day.
I also understand how to pack for the day and what I would need, what I definitely don't need. I would go out on photography days and pack this, and I would always feel much more relieved when I wouldn't have to have my laptop with me.
Yeah.
Because that was always freaking me out. That and travel insurance.
Okay.
I invested in travel insurance simply because anything could happen, and obviously you want to be medically covered in that respect, but I also made sure that I got a travel plan that would cover a high theft deductible.
Oh, gotcha. And what was it called? What was the company you went with?
I don't remember.
All right. And did you ever have to use that?
Nope.
Awesome.
Thank the Lord. Only one item was stolen in the entire near 5 months of traveling, and that happened to be someone else's bike that I was using.
Oh, shit. That's not good.
Yeah. It was in Almeria, and I was borrowing a family friend's bike. And I had been going to this cafe almost daily. I love this spot. I locked my bike a little bit closer. There was a big group of locked bikes, and I parked it a little bit closer to the actual entrance to the cafe in a very public area of the downtown of this small city of Almeria. Worked for about 2.5 hours and came out, and I had a snipped lock. No bike and one snipped lock. And I had no idea.
Did you just freak out?
No. Me and you share the love of a meditation practice.
Yep.
And I was absolutely triggered and very, very sad, but I felt it. I came back to my breath. I kind of stepped aside for a minute, and then I went back and connected to the Wi-Fi so I could call the people that I needed to call to start figuring this thing out. The unfortunate side of that whole thing, I mean, the bike was maybe like worth 40 euros, maybe.
That's not so bad then.
No, pretty damn cheap. And also it wasn't mine, but that doesn't make it, that almost makes me feel worse.
Oh, absolutely. That would be the worst part about it.
Right.
Is that it wasn't mine.
I'd be having to tell the owner.
Oh my gosh.
But the owner is a close friend. Actually, it's Kerwin, who was on an earlier episode.
Oh,
and
nice.
He somehow through the mix, he didn't know that I was borrowing this bike at the time because my cousin had let me borrow it from him and Kerwin was letting him borrow the bike. He had thought that Mike had let me borrow his treasured single speed bike. That was the one that he had been working on. He'd had it forever. There was like family ties to this bike. He had thought that I had just kind of borrowed that, and that was the one that got stolen. And so he was really, really upset. Brian is going to the bathroom right now, but I wanted to take a second and say that Brian is one of my really, really good friends. And I think he's my first fan of the podcast, and I've been dying to have him on the show. And realistically, I've been looking for an opportunity to chat with him on the show about some of the things in his world. But also, I felt like the show was lacking a bit of my own narrative. Some people have been requesting to hear a bit more about what's going on in my world. And admittedly, I've been having a very hard time with the concept of sitting in my studio just talking to myself. And it's very hard. And it's very, very difficult to do it because you never do that unless you're insane. So I did it once, maybe earlier last year, and it was the most difficult episode I've released. And I want to do more topical episodes where I am speaking on something that I've researched or something that I feel passionate about. However, I've been having trouble without a co-host, a producer of sorts. So this is my first stab at that. And it's also a great opportunity to share the stories of these travels while also hearing a little bit about the journeys of Brian Tyree as well. So with that in mind, let's get back into it. The bike got stolen. It was a really, really tense few hours when Kerwin had thought that his favorite bike in the world had been borrowed without his permission and then promptly stolen. So luckily that got resolved, and I ended up having dinner with him that night, and everything got smoothed over. And the next time I see him, I will go out of my way to find a unique bottle of whiskey to give him as a reimbursement, if you will, for a crappy stolen bike.
Absolutely. So this all happened in Spain then?
This was the only theft that I experienced the entire time, but it was enough to let me realize that there are thieves out there and you're not at home.
This is in Almeria?
This is in Almeria, which isn't even Barcelona or Rome where the pickpockets are famous. So it was a good wake-up call.
Yep.
And it reminded me to not leave my computer on the desk when I go to the bathroom and to wrap my leg through my backpack loop when I'm sitting at a desk. It also just gave me kind of just a bit of a heightened awareness to read the room, read the area around me. So,
and it couldn't have happened in a better place, I don't think.
Right.
You had family right there.
Totally.
What if you're all out by your own in Paris or something like that, and someone tried to mess with you or something, and you didn't have anything to fall back on?
Well, sometimes I would make the mistake of keeping my passport in my backpack too, because there was a pocket specifically for your important documents.
Yep.
And sometimes I'd be traveling and I'd forget to take that out of that special pocket. And so then I'd be out jumping around taking photos or whatever, and I'd have my passport on me, which is not a good call. Good practice is you get to your new location and you get that locked up in the safest place possible where you know where it is, and then you move out.
I usually put it underneath my bed.
Sure.
Anywhere. No one's going to look underneath the bed. Everyone's going to look in the drawers. Let's check what's under the bed. So take us to Almeria. I don't know much about the city. Did you know much about it before your family moved there, or?
I knew of the place.
Yep.
I knew that it was beautiful. I knew that my cousin's wife, Anne, had gone to school with a Spanish woman, Elena, the other guest from the last show, who had married an American, Kerwin, and moved to Almeria. So I knew that it was beautiful and I knew where it was. But other than that, I'd never been to Europe. This was my first destination. Get off the plane, get picked up by my cousin and Elena's little sister, Thalia, and we immediately started laughing. Had dinner, great time, and we were off to the races. The next few days were going to the cafes, going to the beach, getting introduced to new people, moving into the room, and just kind of taking it all in.
Absolutely.
Almeria is a beautiful, small town, and it's not a village. It's not a place where you're like, wow, this is so quaint and small. There's buildings, there's your supermarkets, and you can get almost anything you need in this city, but it's not a large city. It's not like Madrid or Barcelona or Seville, any of these places. It's got this small town feel, and most importantly, we were the only Americans. I think I may have, maybe in 6 weeks, crossed 2 or 3 native English speakers.
Interesting.
In the entire 6 weeks. The rest of the time, we were effectively fish out of water. So over those 6 weeks, I got my work and fun schedule kind of balanced, started getting into exercising with my cousins in the morning, hanging out during lunchtime, which is the big meal in Spanish culture. It usually happens around 2:30, and then would work usually from about 4 to 8 or 10, depending on how much work I had throughout the day.
And when would you do your meditation? Because I know for me personally, meditation is the hardest when I'm on vacation or on the weekends. Because you don't have a routine. It seems like you're building up this routine. So when would you schedule that in?
Well, that's a good question. In a perfect world, you wake up, you drink a big old bottle of water, and then you sit down and get cracking. Start off the day with a big win of settling your mind. And I did that for most of the time. But I use the Headspace app, as I mentioned before, and I have reminders. I have a reminder right at 7 a.m. to do the Headspace, but I also have what I think they call them like mindful moments or something like that, where they send you inspiring and just calming quotes throughout the day. So I would use those quotes to remind me. So maybe if I wake up and I have to like book it over to my cousin's apartment to work out, I don't have a chance to meditate, I'd get a quote later in the day that would inspire me to do it. So this trip really helped me start to incorporate meditation into my everyday, kind of like any day, every day sort of mentality, as opposed to start your day. So I would find myself sitting out on a park bench or maybe on the beach and doing my meditation rather than counting it as a lost day because I didn't get it done in the morning. Plus, I was inspired by you, Brian, to accomplish the year-long streak. It's such a American competitive thing to keep your streak alive.
I thought about the whole time.
Yet it's also counterintuitive to what
so egotistical
the purpose of the meditation is.
It's such an ego-driven thing. And that's what I started to notice as I was like, after I did 365 and I kept going with it and I kept, I got to keep my days up. I'm like, what am I doing to myself? Like, what competition is this? So I can show someone at some bar the days that I've meditated in a row. First off, they don't care.
Yeah. Like headier than you, dude.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And so I think I'm on day 6 now for my streak.
Hey, good for you, man.
Yeah.
Admittedly, my ego has kept that streak going.
It's okay.
But the impact of it was that I started finding more meditation throughout the day, where I would either feel that I was getting overwhelmed, I was getting angry, I was sad, I was getting homesick, all the different feelings that come up either just in your everyday life here in America, or especially out in travel when you're just so raw and exposed, I would use the tools that I learned in my meditation throughout the day, whether that's just me taking 6 to 10 deep breaths or walking into like a quiet chapel in the middle of the day and using the inside of a church as a venue for meditation because I hadn't done it yet that day. So Almeria was really just like the breeding ground. It was where I really understood what I was doing and how I could operate and how I could be kind of independent while also meeting new people and jumping out. So 6 wonderful weeks with meeting awesome, awesome people, taking Spanish lessons, speaking as much Spanish as I possibly could. Still wasn't very good, but worlds better than it was when I got there. Oh, we visited Granada, which is about, and I think about an hour and a half train ride from Almeria. Did a weekend there.
When you say we, were you with someone?
I was with my family. I went with the whole family to Granada, and we went to the Alhambra, the famous castle built by the Moors with amazing gardens. Unfortunately, we were there before the main bloom, but it's a very hard ticket to get. I managed to get 2 tickets, and me and their oldest son, Elijah, went and had a fantastic time.
It's awesome.
Wonderful, wonderful experience with him. Rode segways up and down. Had a
Classic.
little, just such touristy fun.
Did you wear a helmet on the Segway?
Helmet and a bright orange vest.
Awesome.
So
definitely need pictures of that.
Make sure you check out, I think it's in some of the GoPro videos.
So they didn't think you were American before. They do now.
Absolutely. So Almeria came and it went, and the jumping off point for my independent travel was Barcelona.
Your Odyssey.
We went out.
It's not a trip. It's an Odyssey.
The Odyssey. So we went with, I think Elijah had another school trip. So it was the 4 kids and Mike and Ann and I, and we went to Barcelona for about 3 days. And then they had to go back to Almeria, and I then moved to a hostel, which was the beginning of my hostel experiences, which I could go into. I'm sure we could share stories.
Oh,
but
boy.
Barcelona, it's Barcelona. You got to see it. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world architecturally. It's got
the Eiffel Tower is actually supposed to be there.
Was it?
The Eiffel Tower is supposed to be built in Barcelona, but they thought it'd be too much of an eyesore.
Brian did a lot of due diligence before coming in on this, this trip.
I never, you hear these names and you hear people talk about them, and I wasn't able to experience a lot of it. I never really went to Europe or experienced them. So I was like, I don't want to sound like an idiot. I want to do some research and also kind of wrap my mind around some of the places that you went. The other interesting fact about Barcelona is all the beaches are man-made.
Really?
Yeah. They made them in 1992 for the Olympics.
They made the beaches.
All the beaches man-made.
Wait, so the whole beach lifestyle that surrounds Barcelona and nightlife is all just a fabrication?
100%.
Well, see, now I'm learning about this.
Exactly. I'll educate you a little bit on the places you went.
Well, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. Well, I did not experience the Barcelona beaches as a lot of people recommend you do. One, because it was February and weather was nice, but it wasn't beach weather. And 2, I had just spent 6 weeks on the beaches of the Mediterranean in South Spain, and I didn't really feel the need to go see another beach. So didn't happen, but I did dive hard into the Gaudi architecture. The Park Güell, the Sagrada Familia, a few other places that I don't remember the names of off the top of my head. And I just started getting used to solo travel. I found a cafe there that I just loved. It's called Brunch and Cake. And I spent, I think, 5 meals. I went to the same place because the food was so good and I loved the energy there. I would usually meet somebody that became like maybe like a day travel partner or something. And I would just try something new on the menu. I'd also use that as a place to read and kind of get my day started. So I took Barcelona pretty slow, went out a couple nights, but mainly just was in it, just experiencing it, taking it a day at a time. The one highlight that I do want to bring up about Barcelona was about an hour outside of Barcelona is a city called Figueres. And I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly, but it's home of the Salvador Dali Museum.
Wow.
And always been a huge fan of Dali and wanted to see it. So I took the day trip, highly, highly recommend it. The city itself is pretty quiet. There's not much else going on there.
Yeah.
But the museum it was like going down the rabbit hole into just the mind of an insane genius. The amount of art that man put out in his lifetime was stellar. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of drawings and little sculptures. I guess he did jewelry for a while, as well as fully decorated rooms that I don't know if he lived there at one time, but just anything and everything. One of my favorite areas was where a photographer had done photo shoots of Dali. And what I liked about it was that obviously it's not just a self-portrait. It's not his artwork. It's just him as a human. And you'd see the fun that he'd have You know, him playing with his mustache, he would arch his mustache up and like look totally crazy. And then he'd droop it down and look like a sad hound dog or something. He just a madman having fun with his craft. And that was like what really struck me about Ali, and reminds people who are in business or in art or anything just to remember to have fun with it, man. It's so easy to get caught up in work and deadlines and goals and things like that. And I really enjoyed spending a day and seeing Ali.
And so how long did you spend in Barcelona?
I spent about, I'd say, 10 days in Barcelona. That was the extent of it. About a week solo and 3 or 4 days with the family. And then by that point, I was thinking of going down to Canary Islands, which is a beautiful island that's part of Spain, but it's actually just a tad west off the coast of Morocco's coast.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much Africa, but it's a Spanish island. I was going to go down there to see a friend, and I figured, well, rather than just flying right to Canary, maybe I'll just go through Morocco. While I'm this close, I would love to see that area. So Morocco was the next step.
And how crazy was it to go from the Spanish culture to the Moroccan? Because like if you look at a map, you're like, yeah, it's whatever. It's right near there. But it's mainly Muslim country, and they speak Arabic.
Mm-hmm. Arabic and French.
How did you deal with that? Like, what was it like? The transition? Did you have culture shock?
Well, absolutely culture shock, but it was actually a bit familiar because the last 2 times I traveled was Southeast Asia and Peru, both of which were very much like going into a very different culture, a very different place where you don't look the same as the people, you don't speak the same language. It was very different to be in Morocco. And my first time in Africa too, and that was definitely a shock in its own way, but also had a sense of familiarity where it was like, okay, now I know that I'm keeping my bag real tight. Now I know that people are going to try to maybe charge me double, and I'd have to haggle my way back down to a reasonable price and have to make sure that I get everything figured out, because if there's any loophole for people to try to get money out of me, they'll take it. I was kind of like back into a familiar form of traveling. And my first stop was Fez. I believe it's the oldest city it used to be the capital. I mean, I'm probably wrong on this, but
the thing that's interesting is there's been inhabitants in that area since, I was looking it up, 190 to 90,000 BC. That's like the Paleolithic time. That's when we were discovering tools, and the spear was the iPhone of the day, right? To think about that, I mean, when you think about Denver was kind of founded in 1850 or something like that. It's insane that it was that old and that there's been inhabitants. It just blows my mind, especially even in Spain. Some of those cities were founded in 900 AD.
The history and the ancient feeling of a lot of these places were really breathtaking. We're back here in Denver now, and most of the buildings you see are 3 years old. They're building so quickly here in Denver, and you go back and you'll see 1,000-year-old buildings. No problem. It's nuts. And they're still standing and they're still beautiful. But Morocco felt like an ancient culture. Certainly there's a lot of touristy areas, and that was, I think, the biggest challenge for me is that Morocco, specifically Marrakesh, is so geared towards the tourist that it put up this kind of skin or like an eggshell for that. Each country has a barrier that you need to permeate in your own way in order to kind of start to find your own genuine experience there. Morocco was the hardest for me to find. I was in Fez. I was getting hassled. The taxi driver would charge me extra and then didn't take me exactly to the front door of my hostel. So then I had to ask someone else who was nice enough to take me to the front door, but then wanted about 10 euros worth of payment just to take me 2 blocks down the road and show me where the door is. I was starting to get really fed up with feeling like I was getting ripped off. And then I would walk out and you're not used to it, just people bombarding you like, hey, try this, try that, and putting scarves on you. And
it's wearing.
It is. And
just wears you down.
Mm-hmm, and just to stick out like a sore thumb everywhere you go, and to be obviously not a local, to not understand any of the languages. It was a struggle at first. So
plus at this point in your travels, you'd just come from being in Spain. I mean, you were in Barcelona for a week, but you were with your family. Now you're alone traveling.
I'd gotten comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So this was the kick in the pants, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
How'd you deal with that?
The same way that I deal with it all, man. Just meditation, breath, and realizing that this is the trip of a lifetime. And when I started feeling legitimately threatened or in danger, you realize that you are what you kind of emit. So I started walking a bit more directly. I would not make as much eye contact, or when the time called for it, I would make a bit more eye contact. If I felt like someone was maybe sizing me up or something like that, I would kind of walk briskly with good posture and make eye contact and then break it and walk forward. And then something that kind of came up when I was in the Amazon that also came up when I was in Morocco is like when you really feel you're in danger and something bad could happen, or God forbid, you could die in this area. I took a step back and was like, well, everyone dies. And I would like to go out doing something badass, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so I thought about that when I was in Morocco a few times when I was going down these dark alleys to try to take a shortcut to get back to my hostel, and something could happen. I could get robbed, mugged, or worse. And thankfully, none of that happened. I held myself well and I avoided those situations when I saw them coming. But overall, I just went at it with like
You made peace with it.
like a carpe diem sort of mentality on the whole thing. So there were scary times, but it takes the scary times to become brave, right?
Absolutely.
So that was the learning experience. But Fez was great. It kind of warmed me up, took a lot of photos.
Going back to that real quick,
Sure.
You're saying that if I were to die right now, I feel like a huge part of that mindset and that thought process has probably come from your meditation.
Absolutely.
And I felt it in myself also, is
Mhm.
that death is something that's scary. I mean, as much as people claim that they know what's on the other side, really no one knows,
Sure.
right? And it's something of the unknown. It's always freaky. It's always something there hovering. But making peace with something like that, or making peace with something that's bothering you mentally, is extremely freeing.
Yeah.
And it gives you that much more confidence, which people probably read off of you. You know what I mean? If you're walking down the street and you have your head held high and you have this confidence about you, people are like, I'm not going to mess with that guy. But if you're kind of freaking out, your head's constantly on a swivel, you're looking out for this, checking your pockets real fast, people are like, I'm going to get this guy for sure. You know, this guy's a sitting duck. So I think that's something through your meditation that you've been able, because I bet you hadn't felt that way before. Think about being in that sort of situation before, because I was in that situation in Southeast Asia. I was hitchhiking. I got into tons of situations that would freak me out.
Absolutely, man.
I didn't have that sort of practice built up yet to be able to have, okay, let's take a step back. Let's focus on my breath, calm down. Let's actually look at what the situation is right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's one of the most important things when you are traveling or going about your day is like, let's take a step back and look at the actual situation, not what you're kind of building up in your mind, what may or may not happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That was probably a huge asset to your whole entire travels, having that daily meditation.
Traveling on a whole, you're very exposed. You're just naturally out of your comfort zone. And so you're forced to accept and adapt to situations that don't normally come when you're in your day-to-day grind here in Colorado or wherever you may live. So you build a fortitude that you can either shelter yourself in and make sure that you don't interact with anybody, or vice versa. You become okay with the situation at hand. You become more present. And there's no better place to do that in travel. But what's most important is that when you're traveling, you're training that muscle really hard in order to apply it in daily life down the line. Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So the fitness, if you will, the mental fitness that I built while in Morocco, dealing with kind of sketchy situations or having to think on the fly, having to communicate with someone who doesn't speak any English, those things made me stronger for the rest of the situation.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a very good point, saying that it's a muscle that a lot of people don't use. And I think another muscle that you probably used a lot that you never really realized is being able to have nonverbal communication. And in a country where they speak Arabic, you must be really good at charades, right? And that's what I always say to people. I'd be like, well, I don't speak the local language, but I'm extremely good at charades. And that's kind of what you have to do. You have to have this nonverbal communication with someone. And even being able to read someone and saying, okay, I trust this guy. He's giving me a fair price, or he's going to take me to where I need to go, or be like, I don't have a good feeling about this guy. Being able to travel and have that sort of instinct and that kind of sixth sense about things is a tool that I feel like a lot of people don't really sharpen very often, because you're surrounded by the same people that you work with or whatever. You don't find yourself in these trying situations, in these really risky and dicey situations where you're like, okay, I need to like follow exactly what I'm feeling right now, because I got nothing else to go on, right? What else are you going to go on?
Yeah.
So being able to kind of look inside yourself and kind of say, all right, let me read the situation and figure out what's going on here.
Right.
I think that's another very important part of traveling, and a muscle that you probably never really used that often that got a good workout recently.
Well, Brian, I feel like both of us are good judges of character.
Yeah.
The people that we surround ourselves with are generally positive people. And so we have that innately. We have that kind of muscle, just kind of like a natural ability to understand someone's energy and decide for yourself whether or not you want to be around that person. But in travel, especially when there's a language barrier, that is such a necessity, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And when there was nothing but this sort of energy, you have to pick up on it, and you have to be very conscious of how you present yourself as well. Because if you're timid, scared, absent-minded, any of these things, you can just read it. And when you're not paying attention to that sort of thing, it turns into a vice. It turns into a problem for you. You know what I mean?
Oh, and who's reading it is a professional.
Right. I mean,
this ain't this first dude's rodeo that's scoping you out right now. He's sitting there reading you and he's like, all right, I can definitely roll this guy for some money, or I can take him for a ride or whatever.
Sure.
You know what I mean? These guys are professionals at what they do. And having that in your mind also is, all right, I need to keep my wits about me.
Well, there's two sides to that equation. There's the people you want to meet, and there's the people you absolutely want to avoid, right? Because the whole point is you want to get away from all of the tourist traps and the pickpockets and things like that. But you also want to attract not only fellow travelers that you meet along the way, but also get to know the locals and start to see what it's really about. If you can make a local friend in a place like Morocco, then good on you. You're doing something right in your travel world.
And did you?
Absolutely. And I'll get to that story. One of my favorite stories of the entire trip happened in Morocco. But I wanted to touch on the energetic side of things because I was just talking to my cousin earlier today on FaceTime. And we were talking about, I built that energy reading and presentation muscle so much when I was traveling out of necessity that now that I'm back in the States, I am hyper aware of the energy of the people that are around me. And it's interesting because you kind of get used to it. You kind of like are in this bubble of your lifestyle and you're like, well, this person sees things a little pessimistically, or this guy kind of gets a little anxious about something or whatever. But coming back and having had to read so many new faces and meet so many new people, coming back and kind of getting readjusted to my friends, I'm picking up on these totally different energy. I was like purged. It's kind of like I smelled the coffee beans and now the cologne is really strong. That's been an interesting concept on something I've been thinking a lot about since I've been coming back. And it's also leading me to feel like I need to make some big decisions in my life as far as the people that I do surround myself with.
Well, the other thing that comes into play while you're speaking about that is that you're starting to see yourself more clearly. You put yourself in a lot of really crazy positions and saw how you reacted. And I think that people don't think about it as that side of things. They think, oh yeah, I read this person really well. And you're thinking about it one-sided. But the other thing that you need to think about is that you're also reading yourself and you're getting to know yourself a lot better and how you react in those situations. And I think that's very, very important.
Absolutely. We both discussed before we got on the air about how we want to structure this thing, but I think that the best way we can do it is just continue to let it go organically. We don't touch on all the destinations, so be it, because I find what we're talking about right now to be way more impactful.
But I got to hear these stories.
More of the nitty gritty. We'll get there.
I agree.
We'll get there, man.
We have plenty of time to chat.
Well, look, I'm getting the look in the dog's eyes. We're going to take him out for a quick piss and we will be right back. All right. So we're back and I was looking at the clock and we're 51 minutes in and I'm about in my end of the second month of a 5-month journey. So we've been jumping around, but it's all good. I'm having a great time.
One thing I did want to ask you about Morocco, since we're in the cannabis industry, did you dabble in any of the hash, the Moroccan hash? I've heard so much about this.
All right. So that's perfect setup because after Fez, which was turned into a great experience, met some great friends, I decided to spend a day and a half in Chefchaouen, which is the famous blue city of Morocco. It's kind of on the side of a mountain, and it's also known as being the hash capital of Morocco. So I took a bus there, and I had about a day and a half to wander around the city, and it was two things. It served as that breakthrough moment where I met a local and I totally got the genuine Moroccan experience that I'd been hoping for, that I'd kind of been turned off by when I was in Fez, getting hounded by merchants and things like that. And it was also where I was introduced to the Moroccan hash. So I landed in Chefchaouen and immediately was like, I got to go explore. This is too cool of a place. The entire city is painted blue. Every single building is the same sort of glowing blue, if you will. Also with the Moroccan architecture and the people, it just felt so cool to be there. So I grabbed my camera gear and I just started heading kind of up because the city is on a mountain. So I just started heading up. I figured, rule of thumb, head for the high ground because that's where you'll get some good photos. I get all the way up to kind of like the edge where there's a kind of like a separating wall, and I'm starting to get these just amazing photos. The clouds are kind of rolling in off the mountains. It's kind of an overcast day, and we're in a Muslim country, so throughout the day there'll be these calls to prayer, I believe is what they are, where they'll just be all over the city.
Like a loudspeaker.
You'll hear people singing and magnifying with a speaker. just awesome to hear it kind of echoing through the mountains. It was just such a cool experience. So I'm out there really having like a religious moment, not like a Muslim religious moment, but just really feeling I'm in this country now.
It's attacking all your senses.
It is. And I'm taking amazing photos of a beautiful landscape. I'm hearing this. I'm experiencing the genuine Moroccan culture. I'm outside of the market and now I'm in Morocco. It starts raining. I'm like, oh, okay, well, can't all be wonderful. So I quickly pack up my photo gear and I look for the first place. There's a little overpass or little shelter up on the wall. So I go there, and in there are two Moroccan guys smoking a joint. Okay, that's cool. I turned them down. I wasn't really trying to smoke weed at the moment. And also I didn't know this guy yet. I didn't know I didn't want to ride into like an intoxicated place with somebody that I had just met, and I needed to kind of vet the situation out. A couple minutes later, a Japanese traveler came into the same shelter to get out of the rain. And we start talking. And this is what was really cool about it, is because the Moroccan spoke pretty good English and the Japanese guy spoke okay English, but the common language that we all seemed to understand decently was Spanish.
Wow.
So that was an interesting kind of moment to sit there and be like, I'm with a Japanese man, a Moroccan man from the mountains, and myself, and we're speaking Spanish to each other.
Yeah.
You know? So we start chatting and we're starting to get to know each other. The rain passes and the Moroccan guy offers to show us the waterfall, which is about, he calls it a 5-minute walk. So
the old 5-minute walk.
The old 5-minute walk. So 25 minutes later, we get to the waterfall and it was beautiful. Once again, we're just going higher and higher up into the mountains. Now the city is a good amount below us and we're getting further and further up. Once we get to the waterfall, he's like, well, there's the vista right up here. And that's just another 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So 45 minutes into this hike, and me and the Moroccan guy and the Japanese man are drenched in sweat. Well, not the Moroccan, because the Moroccan guy, he lives there. He just hops around like it's nothing. That's like his commute. And we're huffing and puffing and trying to make it up this kind of like half trail sort of thing. But we get to the top of this place and it is unbelievable. The view is just perfect. So again, I have this amazing moment, and accompanied with kind of the endorphin rush that you get one from accomplishing a spontaneous hike.
Yeah.
We get off the mountain, we get down to the bottom, and as I had expected, the guy did ask us for a bit of money, but it was one of those things where like the guy is incredibly poor. He just he was friendly with us. He showed us around. He didn't push anything on us. And then at the end, he asked for a little bit of money, and I was more than happy to give him some money for that. The Japanese guy was a little turned off by it, gave him some money and then left. But me and the Moroccan, we had a really good connection just talking in Spanish during that whole hike. And so I was like, look, man, I'll give you some money. I'll give you a decent amount of money, but I need one thing from you. I need you to get me the real Moroccan hash. I don't want that crap that they just try to push to all the travelers who get off the bus. I want the stuff that you and your uncle are enjoying on like Tuesday afternoon. And so he's like, okay. So he takes me down, goes to a totally other area of the city. He goes into his buddy's house. He comes back out with wonderful piece. We're here in Colorado where we're awfully snooty. This was a good piece of hash.
What color was it?
It was like your golden brown. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
It's all hand rolled. So even it's not going to be your crystal
crumbly?
clear. No, it was tacky.
Interesting.
It was like a tack that you'd put up on the wall. It reminded me of what you would expect from that type of hash, but it was smelled great. It looked great. And I couldn't wait to try some. But not only that, but he gave me a little bit of the Moroccan tobacco that they all use for the hash, as well as a few papers. And then he took me back to my hostel, walked me all the way across town to my hostel. I gave him some money. I could not have asked for a more genuine Moroccan experience. And that was the osmosis, right? That was me on the outside of the Morocco. And now I'm feeling like I'm inside of the country. So that was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I could have stayed there longer. It was such a quiet, beautiful area. I could have spent a good amount of time in Chefchaouen, but I had already booked the bus and I had to make it to Marrakesh. So the next day was Marrakesh, which was ironically right back into an even worse market than Fez. Marrakesh I think might take the cake as the place I would recommend the least to go to of all the places that I traveled to. Not that it was necessarily terrible. Had some great times there. It is so consuming as far as the Medina and the touristy market sort of energy. Everyone there is trying to get money out of you somehow, whether they're selling you things or they want you to take a photo of them playing music or snake charming or whatever it is. It's a crazy, crazy place, but it's totally overwhelming and it's not very personable. And it's all about consumer culture. And I think that Marrakesh has seen such a huge transition into consumerism over the last 15, 20 years. Most people don't know much about Morocco other than Marrakesh.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe Tangier or Casablanca, which I have also visited, but I was told to kind of avoid for the same reasons. But what Marrakesh is a wonderful hub to go elsewhere, to other really cool places in Morocco. So brushing over the Marrakesh experience, I met, I'd say, my most valuable travel buddy when I was in Marrakesh.
Wow.
Not only did we just get along fantastic, but he was, I think, late 30s or early 40s, born in Algeria, raised in France, and fluent in Arabic, French, Spanish, and English. The guy had traveled almost every single place I'd even heard of, and he had the best attitude, and he knows how to travel.
What was his name?
His name was Axel.
No way.
Yeah. And if
Mr.
Axel ever...
Rose himself.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He used to be in a band. No. Great energy. We met in the hostel in Marrakesh, and when I told him about the really good deal that I had found on a 3-day trip to the Sahara, he totally jumped on it with me. And before you know it, just a random guy I'd said hi to is now my travel buddy for the next 3 days. So we set out on kind of like an all expenses, get in the van, and you just go from small town to small town on your way to the dunes because they're pretty far away. It was about a day and a half of driving if we went straight, and we stopped along the way at these cool kind of half deserted towns and learned a lot about the history of Morocco on the way. But man, we made it to the Sahara, and when you see those dunes, dude, it takes you right back to Aladdin.
Wow.
Right? Our generation was like, you just think Aladdin when you think the Sahara, Arabian Nights, and it was totally that. As far as you could see, it's just dunes and huge dunes. The camels are right there. They're all making their noises. They're all in line. They're all waiting for you. The Berbers are the nomadic indigenous people that have been living there, I think, longer than Morocco has been an established country.
But then why do they call them nomadic?
Because they still move
they
throughout
the desert.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
a lot of them,
wow.
A lot of them still live a nomadic lifestyle. Although a lot of that's changed. The people that we were with obviously had a business. They would bring in travelers, and they would bring them in. You'd get on your camel, you'd do a camel walk about maybe an hour and a half into the desert. Then there would be a camp that they had set up. They would feed you a meal, sing songs that night, and kind of hang out with each other and get to know the Berber kind of way of life. And then in the morning, a sunrise walk back. So the entire time, ever since this was kind of on my radar, this was the photography dream, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is what I was...
It's like everywhere you look, there's a photo opportunity.
Everything. You can't even look in the wrong direction. So I was really excited for this moment. And as we're getting onto these camels and starting to walk, first of all, camel riding is not a pleasant experience. Those dudes, they will bounce and bump you around, and it destroys the groin. It is a painful experience. But we were walking, and I'm trying to take photos, and this bouncing around, and all we're getting is sandstorm. It's getting windy, and it's killing all the visibility, so you can maybe see one dune down the line, and you can't see anything else. We get to the camp, and the storm gets worse. By the time the sun set, it was a full-on sandstorm. You did not want to go outside because you start getting sand in your eyes. It'd be hard to really breathe deeply. And I was starting to get really discouraged because I was like, this is the once in a lifetime opportunity, and I'm not going to be able to shoot photos. I wouldn't even take my camera out there because the sand would get into all of the electronics and it could ruin my camera. So I went to bed pretty discouraged. I was like, man, this is such a bummer to be here all the way on this side of the planet and to not have this opportunity. But I stayed positive for the next morning. I thought maybe it would die and maybe we'd have a still morning. I set my alarm for 3:30 in the morning. I was like, I'm going to get out and I'm going to see if we can get some good shots. I think call time was like 5 a.m. anyway. Gotcha. So I woke up and I looked outside and it was still. Awesome. You could see every star in the sky. It was the most visibility I've ever seen in the sky.
Yeah.
It was just absolutely breathtaking. And I just cracked a huge smile. I stopped being exhausted from waking up at 3 in the morning. And I was like, it's time to shoot right now. Got all my gear out there, went and got some phenomenal nighttime photos and just kept shooting until the sun rose. And we took this camel ride back to the main base, and it was just a perfect morning, and got some of the best photos of my life on that trip and just the memories associated with it. And pretty much about 5 minutes after we left to start heading back to Marrakesh, another sandstorm rolled in and killed the visibility for the rest of the day. So we really hit that
sweet spot,
that beautiful sweet spot of pre-dawn and into the sunrise that just will just stick with you, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So that was the highlight of Morocco. Absolutely. And upon getting back to Marrakesh and having seen that, I was like, all right, this place has worn its welcome. I'm ready to get back to Europe. Yeah.
So did Axel travel further with you?
No, actually, he didn't even make it back to Marrakesh because he somehow knew somebody that was living in one of these Berber communities even further into a remote area. And they had been discussing over email or Facebook or some way. And so he actually figured out a ride because he spoke Arabic with a local to go to an even more remote area. So I haven't caught up with Axel since. I think we may have shot a couple messages on WhatsApp. I know he made it out of the desert, but no, I never saw him again. We hugged it out. We had those moments and that was it.
Yeah, it's funny how you meet those people and just like those interactions that you have in traveling that all of a sudden, I don't know what it is, you just become like best friends almost. I always used to say, because when I was traveling from the age of 20 to 25, I didn't live anywhere longer than 3 months. And when it came to friends and things of that nature, I would always say that my friends, it's just awkward hellos and sad goodbyes. So my life was filled with constantly, right? Yeah. So where are you from? And blah, blah. And then it's, all right, man, this has been awesome. It's been so great. Yeah. Hopefully we can meet back up again.
Totally.
I mean, me and my wife just had it. We went down to Belize and we met someone down there. He was retired and he just travels by himself, older gentleman. We just hung out and we'd see him around. We didn't plan to meet up or anything like that. We'd be out having breakfast and see him walking down the street and we'd be like, hey, come up and hang out. You want some breakfast? And catch up with him all the time. And he actually recently just wrote my wife and it was just great to hear him. You know what I mean? And it's just like, if you lived close to me, you'd be my best friend. We'd hang out all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
Axel's probably just raging it out there right now.
So, I don't know where he is, man, but I guarantee he's having a good time doing it because his philosophy and just spending time with him, it was almost like a travel mentor. The way he conducted himself, I mean, the way that he got us through those 3 days was unlike any way I've traveled before. He would speak Arabic to the people and he was obviously extremely gregarious and friendly as well. They would start sitting us at other tables than the rest of the tourists so that they could give us the more local prices rather than the tourist prices. And they didn't want the other tourists to see the bills and the differences. So we were getting 30% different pricing at all of the meals that we'd go to. We were getting our scarves for the Sahara so we could keep the sand out of our faces, and we'd get 2 for the price of 1. All from obviously having that language and being born in Algeria, you immediately kind of break through that tourist sort of assumption of the person, but also, I mean, his energy. He was that type of guy that could bring an entire group of strangers to laughter and to start warming up to each other just through his vulnerability and his energy. Just such an inspiration of how to conduct yourself when you're out there.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I've lost track of the amount of awesome people that I've met out there traveling. And I can only hope that somehow we reconnect with all of them at some point in our lives, you know?
Yeah, I did the same thing. You just lose track. Like we were just talking about, you meet these people and you're like, you could be my best friend if we lived close to each other. Because it takes a certain kind of person to be in Morocco at that time with all the craziness. And you share that kind of kinship of what you guys are both going through at that time. And it's funny because I made so many friends. I added them as friends on Facebook. And now to this day, I don't go on Facebook that often. Try not to. And I'll go through my newsfeed. I'm like, who are these people? I don't even know who they are. And I look them up. Oh, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I met them in Guatemala. Yeah, that's right.
Totally. Yeah.
So from Morocco, you then go to Portugal, correct?
Yes. Well, there was a quick stopover. So the original plan was to go to Canary Islands, like I had mentioned.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But I found out that the waters between the Moroccan coast and the Canary Islands are very dangerous, especially in the winter months, to the point that a ferry had sank a few years prior. So they weren't exactly chartering a lot of ships through that area at the time. Not only that, I saw tons and tons of cheap flights to Canary from Spain, but hardly anything in Morocco. In fact, they'd be really expensive and they would basically be layovers in Spain. So I'd have to fly up to Spain to get back to Canary. So I made the decision. I wasn't happy about it, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to get back to Spain and see where it takes me. But throughout that I'm about a little over 2 months deep into my traveling. I just kept hearing Portugal. It just kept coming up when I would ask other travelers, what do you recommend? Just kept coming up. Portugal and Budapest. I was like, okay, so those have to happen. So my flight was from Marrakesh back to Seville. I spent about 4 days in Seville, which, to keep it short, Seville is beautiful, extremely historic city, amazing architecture, really good vibe too. And what I really enjoyed about Seville was that it almost felt comfortable because I had been in Spain for so long and I had a little bit of Spanish behind me and I kind of knew the culture. So going back to Sevilla was just like, oh, okay, now I'm feeling at home again from Morocco. But I was only there for about 3 or 4 days. And then I caught a cheap flight to Porto, which is the northern city. It's kind of the second city of Portugal. Most people know Lisbon being the capital and the big city,
Yep.
but Porto is on the rise. Porto is super cool. It's smaller. It used to be a port town. It was really dodgy for quite a long time because Portugal has had kind of a rocky history and has never really had the empire, if you will, like Spain or Britain or France. So that city has kind of seen some rough times. But with the rising tourism coming through Lisbon, the Portuguese government decided that it was time to make Porto a destination. So I went up there and just loved it, man. It just really was a warm invitation. The Portuguese people are incredibly friendly. They'd rather speak English than Spanish.
Really?
Yeah. So if you're rocky on your Portuguese, they would prefer that you speak English than a lot of Spanish. And I think it has a lot to do with that kind of Spain, Portugal, mild distaste for each other.
Yep.
Not to say that it's like a hatred or anything. It's just that's the history between them. So don't say gracias when you get water from a Portuguese. Say obrigado or say thank you. I spent about 3 days in Porto. Beautiful city, another photogenic city. Some of my favorite photos were on the viewpoint from there. And then kind of did a little mini tour down through Portugal, stopped in some small cities and ended in Lisbon, which was everything that people advertise it as. One interesting thing that I kind of viewed on these two Portuguese cities is that Porto is very, very similar to Portland. It's got this unique kind of culture. It's a little bit subculture. It's a little smaller, kind of a closer community feel. And there's a river that runs right through it, just kind of like Portland. But then what's also interesting is that Lisbon is super similar to San Francisco geographically. So first of all, there is a bridge that goes across the big body of water in Lisbon that was built by the same guy who did the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a red bridge that looks like a miniature version of the Golden Gate in Lisbon.
Did you hear anyone kind of draw the same conclusions that you did, or is this just purely your take on the cities?
I can't imagine I'm the first one to come up with this comparison, especially with the San Francisco-Lisbon thing, but I hadn't heard of it beforehand.
When you say to other people that have been there, are they like, oh, yeah, I do?
I think, people agreed with me because not only do you get this Golden Gate Bridge, but it's incredibly hilly city, and they have trolleys everywhere. So,
oh, wow.
I mean, it doesn't get more
all they need is rice Roni.
No, but they do have the best pastry I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Is based outside of Lisbon. It's called the pastéis de nata. It's like a cupcake. Has like a flaky pie crust almost around it, and inside is like a vanilla egg custard. And it was made by these monks in a monastery kind of outside of Lisbon in a place called Belém. And they sell these things everywhere.
Are they
like
sweet?
Hot dog
Are they
stands.
savory? Or what
They're
is it?
Sweet.
Okay.
They're sweet and they're insanely delicious. And you just, almost everywhere you go, they have them available. But there's a few places that you have to go to get them fresh and like the original recipe and things like that. So I highly, highly recommend trying one of those. It's kind of hard not to. They're everywhere. It's like buying pizza in Italy, right? You're going to find it in Portugal. Delicious, not healthy, but worth the...
It's okay, you're walking it off.
God. In Lisbon, absolutely.
Yep.
So Lisbon was wonderful. Great people there. My favorite hostel of all my entire trip was in Lisbon. And
why was that your favorite hostel?
it's kind of like a hostel is only as strong as its weakest link, right? Its weakest factor. You got to have good Wi-Fi. I mean, especially in this type of era, not just for connecting with your friends, but I mean, you got to come up with serious logistics. And if you have to walk a half mile away to get to a coffee shop and buy a meal or a drink just to connect to the internet, it's a pain in the ass, especially when you're paying to stay in a place that advertises Wi-Fi. So strong Wi-Fi is huge when you're figuring out your directions, booking flights, trying to link up with friends, because I didn't have a phone service the entire time. The second part is a sound kitchen. Having a kitchen that's worth a damn makes a whole world of difference because, one, you can actually eat the food that you know feels good in your body and you're not just taking stabs at different restaurants. And I mean, we're traveling for 4.5, 5 months. You got to save money somewhere. So to me, it's like a cooking in your kitchen at the hostel saves a lot of bad decisions from happening, right? Because you go out to a restaurant, you're going to spend more money. Maybe you'll get a drink. Maybe that leads to more drinks. Maybe that leads to you spending a ton of money and going out and feeling like shit the next day. And as a long-term traveler, I had to pick and choose when I was partying, when I was going out. And
you have to, or you'll just party the whole time.
Right. You'll go broke, you'll get totally out of shape, and you'll feel like you kind of missed a lot of stuff because you'll see everything at night and you'll see all the bars, you'll see all the clubs, but you won't see the sights, you won't see the view, you won't meet the people, you won't see what's going on the day-to-day. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to the Mindful Millennial Podcast. If you loved this episode, check out some of the other MindMill episodes. They're all free and available at themindmill.com and on all the major podcast platforms. Also, please take a second and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's incredibly easy and it really is the best way to help the show. Stay tuned for more MindMill episodes coming down the line. I'll keep them interesting for you, I promise. Take it easy. This episode of the Mindful Millennial Podcast is supported by Isagenix. Isagenix provides premier health and wellness products for body recomposition, physical and mental performance, and healthy aging. I was introduced to Isagenix by the owners of my regular gym. Two of the healthiest people I know, they couldn't help but share how the Isagenix program broke them out of their physical plateau and helped them achieve their gains, both physically and mentally. I was a bit skeptical, as one normally is when introduced to a nutrition program. But since hearing of Isagenix, I've witnessed over a dozen people firsthand transform their bodies and their minds with these products. Isagenix works hand in hand with a healthy diet, providing the much-needed plant-based proteins, pre- and post-workout supplements, cleansing kits, and much more. I recently brought a stockpile of Isagenix on my trip to Europe. The goal was to have some reliable and on-hand nutrition while on the move. I was floored by the results. Not only was it handy and a money saver, I've never seen such dramatic gains in my body. I felt strong, focused, high energy, and satisfied. So give Isagenix a try. It's cheaper than most comparable products on the shelf, made of the highest quality ingredients, and delivered right to your door. They even offer a no-questions money-back guarantee. Whether you're looking to switch up your normal supplements, kickstart your fitness, or discover a new healthy snack, Isagenix has something for everyone. Right now, go to sethmarcus.isagenix.com to obtain discounted membership pricing on all your orders.